Hey y'all, Moses here. Today we're going to be talking about discovering and then refining a personal strategy or team strategy in PUBG. PUBG is at its core a set of decisions mixed in with the nuance of a skill-based shooter. So decision making and strategy are a big factor in being successful. Even the most skillful players in the game need to play with some level of strategy. Very few players can reach the top of the leaderboards based on mechanical skill alone. In this video, we'll be covering a few things. 1. Applying logic to strategy choice. 2. Minimizing RNG factors. And 3. Executing the chosen strategy. Battlegrounds can be cruel, and even the best strategies can be undone by factors in the game beyond our control. Strategy must be constantly evaluated and refined depending on your playstyle and expectations of success. The goal of this video is to identify the principles that will help you form a strategy for your personal playstyle or the preferred playstyle of your team. I encourage you to be creative, as PUBG is a unique game where each round offers an entirely new set of circumstances to navigate. So with that said, let's get started. One, applying logic to your strategy. There are generally two common strategies that players will follow. The first is to hug the edge of the play zone and use the blue as a bit of a security blanket. This strategy provides a lot of security as players will typically only approach from the blue in the early game, and they often arrive soon after the circle is changed. Regardless of approaching players, defending from inside the new play zone is easy, as enemies will already be taking damage from the blue and will be easier to kill. The main drawback is that being on the edge of the circle provides the lowest chance of being in the new play zone when the circle changes. This could potentially mean longer movement phases that are happening more often. Movement phases are when the circle changes and players must jockey for a new position in the next safe zone. Players on the edge of the circle might have to move farther, while players at the center should have the least distance to travel. This will mean that the best spots might be taken while the edge player is traveling, which will mean more fights against hard-to-take compounds and natural cover. Therefore, movement phases are critical, and the time when players are at the highest risk of dying. We'll talk more about that in the next point, but for now, let's talk about the next common strategy, which is playing the middle of the map. The center strategy is built around playing in the middle of the map to minimize travel and movement phases. The center of the current circle provides the highest chance that you'll be inside or very near the new play zone when the circle changes. The other part of this strategy is occupying the best possible spot within the center of the new play zone. Typically that would be a compound or building, but natural cover can work well too. As the game progresses and these types of spots are harder to come by, players will begin crashing these compounds. If you're a good defender, you can rack up easy kills as players approach or enter your area. Eventually you'll enter the endgame, and you'll have to rely more heavily on gunplay and movement, but getting to the endgame on its own will have increased your winning chances dramatically. Out of these two strategies, the center-based tactic appears to be the most popular at the competitive level, and in high-level leaderboard play as well. So when choosing a personal strategy, regardless of whether you follow one of these common tactics or one of your own creation, consider the following principles. 1. Reduce the amount of time spent running or driving during movement phases. 2. Select the best cover and take it for yourself. So with the basics of choosing a strategy based on logic out of the way, let's talk about the second point. Reducing RNG factors. The most frequent complaint I see when it comes to getting better or playing the game in a competitive way is that the inherent RNG factors of PUBG are impossible to overcome. While you may not be able to predict or control things like loot or circle changes, you can do your best to minimize the impact those things have on your game. To minimize loot RNG, you can alter your early game behavior. Many players will drop with their first priority being a gun followed by equipment. This could mean dropping in a place where you can gear yourself or your entire team as quickly as possible. If you're lucky, you'll find a gun quickly and clear out enemies near you to secure your zone and get geared up. RNG could just as easily grant your enemy a gun and you'll find yourself back in the lobby. If you want to reduce the early game RNG in large towns or cities under the plane path, you can land at a vehicle spawn and drive to an area that was difficult to reach via parachute. Essentially, you land to find a car or bike, and you or your team drive off to a remote city as quickly as possible and gear up in relative safety. This might make for a boring or uneventful early game, but might make the transition into the mid and late game a little smoother. We talked about the best way to minimize circle RNG based on strategy in the previous point, but there are a few other little things that might factor into how the circle might shift. Over the last few patches, it seems that after about the third or fourth circle, most of the water will be adjusted out of the play zone. So if you're choosing the best spot inside the play zone that has a lot of water in it, consider that you may get a heavily favored circle on the side opposite of where the water is currently located. This isn't always the case, but happens regularly enough that I consider it when I play myself. The most important thing when it comes to your personal preference or playstyle is to reevaluate and review where things are working and where they're not. To do that efficiently and effectively, you need to strongly adhere to your identified playstyle. This brings us to the last point: executing your strategy and evaluation. By now, I hope you've latched on to whatever preference you find the most appealing, or have at least considered your own personal playstyle and what that means. Now it's time to look at what executing that strategy might look like. During your game, if you're playing the center of the circle, you should do your best to crash the building or compound you've chosen in the same way. Approach your target, gain entry, and kill anyone that opposes you. If you're having issues with the approach, work on your vehicle skills. If you're having issues fighting in close quarters, evaluate your weapon choice. The shotgun can be underutilized in the mid-game, and SMGs can be a good choice as well. Ultimately, if you're getting caught in any one part of executing or working on that strategy, work on that part specifically. That could mean a few drops in the military base or the school to sharpen up your close quarters fighting skills. Or spending time attacking every single compound you think might be occupied to get used to the vehicle mechanics. If you can record your games, I'd use Shadowplay or some other software to save the last 5 minutes after a death, or even a win to see if you can learn anything from that footage. I review my deaths a lot, and it's helped me understand common mistakes I make. Similarly, reviewing wins might give you some insight onto what worked and why. To summarize, executing a sound strategy while minimizing RNG factors can present you with a consistently high chance of making it to the end game and winning more rounds, be it in the solo game mode or in duos or squads. Ultimately, you need to look at the body of work and not focus on the round-to-round variables. Only a few of the best players will see a 25% win rate, so when it comes to the new or improving player, it's important to have realistic expectations. I hope this video was helpful to you. If you have any feedback, I encourage you to leave a comment down below with your thoughts. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you out there.